I invite you to take your Bibles, please, and turn to the New Testament. We're in Ephesians, the 6th chapter, primarily in this section. We're preparing our children for a godly future. Godliness is not just being God-likeness. We can never be deity, but it's having piety toward God, that whatever He wants us to do, we do. He wants us to be holy. Oh, His character is holy. We're going to be holy in all manner of living. So when we get our priorities right, that we're going to serve God and have reverence and piety toward Him, if we can instill that into our children, then whatever God demands of them in life, they will be prepared for that. They'll be prepared to submit to that. Do you see this? These things, is that complicated? I'm not talking about complication in practice and implementing it, but is it detailed? And that's what I wanted to see. It's not detailed. But these are imperatives that they learn to obey. They do what is right. They do what is well-pleasing in whose sight, or in connection with whom? The Lord. The Lord. And they need to know honor, and they need to understand to whom are they going to give their honor? Who do they respect? And we have an outline. If you can follow that with me, there's some details to that. But we got into that. Children obey. They're going to have to learn to do that. And I think we as parents, we probably go crazy if we don't teach them that, because they're going to rule, and they're going to serve themselves. All they see is their life, and everybody rotates around them. And we have to teach them about obedience. We talked about that. We also talked about doing what is right. Is that going to be affecting the conscience of your child? Do what is right. Right and wrong, those are moral issues. I don't see it. It's something that the inward man is going to do. And the conscience is always going to react according to what we think is right. Paul killed Christians. Why? He thought it was right. He didn't violate his conscience. So the conscience has to be tempered with knowledge so that we can know what's right, so we're not doing something wrong because we think it's right. And when we are doing something wrong, and our conscience is going to be taught with our knowledge, that we'll correct that. Because why? We've learned to be godly. It's all going to interact with one another. And so we want to be well-pleasing the Lord, and we're going to teach them to what to honor as well. And that's what we got down to. Well-pleasing the Lord in Colossians 3 and verse 20. I give you two passages there, Galatians 1:10. In our life, if I were still trying to please men, I could not be a bondservant of Christ, Paul says. Pleasing men. We're going to be well-pleasing to whom? The Lord. And we're going to teach them that. Ephesians 6:5-8. What if your child in the first century was going to be a slave? They don't have to do anything. They don't have to be careful. No, they're going to be Christians, and they may be slaves. And in doing that, they're going to serve their master. Not as eye-pleasers, men-pleasers, only working when the boss is there, and especially if it's a woman boss. You men are going to find ways to get around that. Oh, here comes the boss. And you're only going to work when she sees you. I mean, there's all sorts of things that happen in life. Women are bosses, men are bosses, and you're going to be involved in working. Is that child going to learn to honor work? And are they going to then do so even when the boss is not looking, because they have a higher boss, and that's God? They're always going to be in His sight. So those are the things of priorities being set. And you can start early with those. And then the children are to honor on page 2 of your outline. That's how we're putting a valuation upon something. You honor something, then you have valued it in your mind. Regardless of whether that's right or wrong, that's what honor is. And our honor has to be on the right things. And I just give an example here in the Bible. who should be your child's heroes? And we have a list of heroes in Hebrews 11. Would those be good stories to tell your children when you're developing them real young? Because that's an imperative, that they're going to be people that are going to honor their father and mother. And for a while, father and mother are heroes. That's their life. That's the grown up, and they feed me and they take care of me. They play with me, and they guide me here and they protect me. Your parents become a hero till they're teenagers. Then they get other ones. Do you have your picture on your teenage child's bedroom door? Is that who they have? Their dad and mom? I hope some would do that, but most of them, no, it's what the culture is developing as heroes. And you're going to counteract that. See, we're looking at the family under attack in a very subtle way. Oh, they're not here planning, wanting to control your life, but some of them get more vocal about that as a family, parents. This is how you're going to raise your children. But we as godly parents need to prepare them to be godly. We're involved in honor, and can you think of heroes any better than Abraham and expressing his faith? And all of those men in Hebrews 11, and you've got a woman there too. Her name is Sarah. And we talked about marriage, that Sarah is one that did not fear, and even though she is in subjection to her husband, she didn't have a fear of the world, but she reverenced God, she reverenced her husband. And you got some example there of Sarah and her faith. And so you can add other people. Abigail, what a wonderful godly woman she is in the Bible, and how she affected King David with truth. And so those are people that you can teach at a young age. That's who you honor, those people of faith. And because that's what you want to instill in your children. And we could shut it down right here and you'd be on your way. Those are the only imperatives that I see in Ephesians 6:1 and Colossians 3:20. And you give me any other New Testament. I can see where parents ought to lay up for the children, children up for the parents. I got those related things about parenthood. But when I just boil down the imperatives, it's pretty clear, pretty simple. Now, how we implement this, it's interesting. That's up to you. God didn't give all these details, but we can put some things together. Because in these imperatives, there's some things you do and there's some things you don't. Our emphasis in this series of lessons is on the father, because that's where God places the authority in the family. It's upon the husband. He's head of the wife. And why does he express the idea of fathers, provoke not your children to wrath? Because they're the principal ones in bringing them up. And one of those is nurturing them. What does the word nurture mean here in the New Testament? I know what we use it as. We use, but what it means here, just bring up. Well, are you going to bring them up physically? They're going to grow and you want to make them healthy and you're going to have responsibilities there. But nurture them here is emphasizing the spiritual realm of your child, where the world just they don't think much of it. I'll let them grow up and choose a God they want to serve. Or no God at all. It's no big deal. Not with us. Because here we are godly parents, and we realize God exists, and God has revealed how we should raise our children. And it's not the opinion of any preacher or elders or judgment of members, I know how to raise children. No, we're saying, all right, you got that. That's wonderful. What does God say? And I just don't press it's not complicated, but it's thorough. So I'm going to bring them up. What am I going to bring them up in? I'm going to bring up a good education, and they're going to learn how to work, and they're going to learn how to take responsibility. Okay, that's fine. But what does he say here? It's the nurture that I'm bringing them up in the chastening of the Lord. This word chasten is going to introduce you to corporal punishment. Not abuse, but punishment. It hurts And you're going to set guidelines. And you're going to bring them up understanding there are guidelines, and it's going to start here in our family, that's imperative for you to do. And that is obey your mother and your father. Obey your parents. Father's taking the lead, the mother's right there. And we talked about they therefore need to be united when they're demanding things of their children, because you don't want to confuse the child. But here's the chastening of the Lord. So there's going to be that discipline, because see, well, I warned them all right. Okay, that's two different things. The chastening, bring them up in the chastening and admonition. Who is the authority behind both of those? Oh, it's my chastening, it's my warning, I'll do what I want to do, I'm dead. No, you're not a godly dead if that's the case. You forgot a component. There's somebody higher than you, fathers, that is wiser than you, that has given you these areas of responsibility and allow you in your family to carry them out, to implement them, without getting real specific about it. And so we realize that the chastening of the Lord is used in the New Testament, that it's going to be involved in the rod of discipline. There's the spanking issue, timeout issue, naughty chair issue, whatever generation we're living in. But there's some discipline and correction. This is corrective discipline. And we're going to get into that in just a few moments. But there's also the admonition. That's warning for the mind. There may be pain for the bottom, but there's warning for the mind. And both of those are connected with the Lord. We want them to grow up to be godly. They need to understand early, this is what the Lord wants us to do in raising you. And so they may not understand it when you are doing this discipline and warnings. But that's nurturing. And how many parents understand that in our world today? Nurturing, give them some food. I'll make sure that maybe the school has food for them on breakfast because I want them to be healthy and I can't afford it. There's safety nets. But we as parents realize that's true. We need to be doing that, and we're going to put that into practice. Any questions on those two things? And just brought back up in our passage in 1 Thessalonians 5:23, what is the total makeup of the human being according to 1 Thessalonians 5:23? He says, may your body and soul and spirit, it said, we be preserved without blame at the coming of the Lord. What has he just told you? What's your makeup? You got your body, that is the physical body, and then we go into the inward man. And what gives life to that body and activating is soul. You got a lot of soul. The Greek speaks about that. It's part of the inward man, the invisible man. Very difficult to separate that from the spirit. But the spirit, we were never made in the image of God as soul. He breathed into our nostrils the breath of life, and he became a living soul, person, enlivened. That's what soul is. But spirit is that we're made in the likeness of God. God is spirit. If we're going to worship him, how are we going to worship him? In spirit and in truth. Not the way we want to do it. We'll get spiritual. No, what does he want? How does he want us to be worshiped? So that's, and what it does, he takes you from the physical to that which stands between spirit and body, that enlivens the body. It can be discouraged, and therefore we don't want to act too much with our body. It is that part of the inward man that enlivens the body, becomes a living person. But what's behind that is spirit. And there's where our spirit departs from our body. And therefore, he didn't look like he has any soul left. He's dead. But that's the totality of your child's being. It will never change. That's the totality of everything. And so we get it. I need to prepare for food for my children. I need to feed them, and they need to be fed, and I know that responsibility. But here's the other responsibility for the spirit and the soul. We're going to talk about discouragement. That's a soul issue, even though we're downtrodden in spirit. They work together, but if you're going to divide it, the Bible says it can divide between soul and spirit. And when I read my Bible, I begin to realize that's a distinction there. That we love with all of our heart and soul, all of our being, our strength and our might. All that is enlivening the body. But it is something deeper than that, in that we're spirit as well. That's the essence of who we are. And because that's who God is. And we're made in His likeness. Not flesh, but He's the source of life. That's why we became a living soul. But we have that spirit. So that's what we're supposed to do. But we have a don't there, don't we? Fathers, you're probably physically stronger than your children. Husbands, you're probably physically stronger than your wife. And we're not to abuse that superior bodily strength at times when we might be angry and when we're not perfect like Jesus is as the head of His body. So they have to be the warning that we realize that the fathers, when they are nurturing their children, involves the discipline that comes their way. It's when it usually happens, that they are not to provoke them, and it's called it exasperated wrath. The children are angry. Their anger is because they're exasperated. What do they want me to do? That's why fathers and mothers need to get online. What do they want their child to do? Well, he's got to mow the yard. He got to do this. Well, I told him to go clean this room. He didn't know what to do which. What is he going to do? Well, he do all of it. Well, what do you want to do first? Well, I want it done first. No, I want it done first. Now, you got to agree so the child's not crazy. But wonder if they don't do that. Last week we looked at Matthew 21. Jesus used the example of a father telling his sons to go work. And one says, I'll go do it, and he doesn't do it. The other one says, I'm not going to do it. But eventually he goes and does it. Who did the will of the Father? Everybody knows the answer. They did what Jesus asked it. What's the latter one? It's the one, well, he didn't want to do it. He said he wasn't going to do it. But eventually, what is important? He did it. That is obedience there. And we have to make sure that our rules and our family they're coordinated between father and mother, because they're supposed to obey their parents. But Colossians 3:21, it's just interesting how you can arouse somebody to be dispirited. Rouse them up. They're lively. No, they're downtrodden. And that's what happens with abusive fathers that don't apply the Word of God to their own lives. And that's what Colossians is telling us about what fathers are doing. Fathers, provoke not your children, and I would say that they be not discouraged. Don't provoke them to wrath, and we see it in Paul. So there is that anger, and it can be a serious anger because they just despise what the rules you're putting on them and all the things that you're demanding of them. And we've got to realize, what am I putting on them? Is it godly restraint to teach their conscience of what's right and wrong? You can't ignore that. But a lot of times the discipline comes with punishment that is too severe, that's applied when one is angry, not the way we're going to see how it ought to be applied. But it can lead to spiritless discouragement from a child. And unreasonable demands, and I give an example. What about Jacob's family and Joseph and his brothers? Was that a good relationship going there? And what did the father do that led to jealousy and tempted murder and get rid of the kid Joseph? What started that? Favoritism. And how did they see favoritism? He got him a coat of many colors, and I didn't get one. 11 other boys didn't get one. Joseph, I got one. And he could wear it. I mean, that's just right in your face. And he's telling them about dreams he's had, that they're going to fall down and worship him. Can you imagine your brothers hearing that from your little bitty brother? He just talking big. He's naughty. Some of the translations have it. But they are so angry that they're ready to kill him. Older brother has to step in, think he's going to get him out of the pit before they do that, and they sell him off into captivity, and the story goes on, just the way God planned it. But we can be doing things as parents and don't even realize the problems that it exasperates, it discourages people, discourages your children. And again, God doesn't go into a lot of details how to carry that out, but I'm sure we're not all perfect in that. And we have to be aware of that discipline must be applied, but it needs to be consistent. It doesn't need to be overpowering, that you're trying to, because you're just angry and you're just hitting extra hard or whatever, how you're disciplining them. Or they won't eat for a month, and I don't know what kind of, used to be, you go to bed, go to bed, you're not going to have dinner. Well, you're not going to have breakfast, and you're not going to have lunch next day either. Depends how angry you are. And we just have to always have a gear on that as fathers and leading that. Because that's one thing he says don't do. Why would he have to say that? Because it's easy to do when you're in authority and somebody's embarrassed you, your children. You react. That's the way we do. And we have to be protective of that. Any questions on that Richard? Yeah. You got to stay with it, don't you, with them? It's like breaking horses, isn't it? Got to do that. Okay. Now, let's look at compatible goals. So, I know the imperatives, and so this idea they need to learn to obey. It's interesting, this word obey means to hear under. Attentive listening. You're speaking, and I honor you enough to listen under you. Isn't that what a child's supposed to be doing? Of listening to you, because they are to learn to respect that authority. And that's where the discipline comes in when you're not listening. How do you get your child's attention to listen to you? Whop them up the side of the head? Listen to me. Well, there's your discipline. But early on, we can train them and encourage them through training. Because how many times does a child, while you're talking to them, look away from you? Does it happen a lot? They're embarrassed. They're not. And what do? Hey, you look at me. You don't look at me. Well, nothing wrong with that. But to get eye contact, it's probably a pretty good thing. Listen to me. Don't be looking around, and you don't have to whip them to do that. You can just kind of encourage them. Mom's talking to you, Dad's talking to you. I want your undivided attention. Because you're going to be listening under me. That's the imperative. Now, how you get there, we have to be wise in doing that, but sometimes kids that just look away and they're not listening to you. Do you feel like people listen to you when you talk to them and they're looking somewhere else? No, they're not listening to you. Oh, yes, I am. I can do 3 things at once. Well, I'm not number one. Right now, you're supposed to be listening to me. And who are most important people today in our world? Listeners. Who's a listener? They acted like I was the only one important in that moment. That's a quality, boy, and you better learn that in order to get, to do well in this life. Be a good listener. Well, where should we be learning that? In our homes. And just this word obey, I'm going to be obeying parents. I'm under them. I'm going to obey God. I'm under Him. And I'm going to be listening to those with authority. I'm going to get my undivided attention. What a way to train your child. In that just simple area of no distractions here, just between you and me. I want you to listen to me. And then offer something constructive instead of just tearing them down because you're angry with them. There's obedience. It fosters self-discipline. So that's what obedience does. And so we're teaching them to obey, listen under, but here's what happens. Why are we giving discipline? We call it corrective discipline. What's the discipline? It's painful for the child, painful for you. You don't like to do that. But what's our goal? They're going to learn in life there are parameters here, and you cross that, you pay for it. You pay dearly for it. You learn to control yourself. You learn to discipline yourself. We're trying to teach them that early on. There are guidelines. There are things, don't cross the line. And we learn it, don't go out in that busy street. We don't go here, it's dangerous. Don't touch the hot pot, it's dangerous. And they learn that early. You're setting parameters. And you don't want them to lose their life because they violated it one time. You might say, well, let them burn their hand on the pot, they'll learn better. But you're trying to avoid that type of thing too. But the goal is the idea of self-discipline. And why is this important in Ephesians? What was the promise? What was the commandment had the first promise connected with it, which is not literally true, but it's the first one because I think the child is just growing up here and it's the beginning of life. He made earlier promises for what the children of that, but this is the one that the Bible says is the first commandment with promise. And maybe the one for the child as they're growing up. That they would live long. In Deuteronomy 5:16, live long in the land. We've been studying Deuteronomy and hope we realize, the land. If they don't keep following God, they're going to be taken from that land. They're not going to live long in the land. But there's the other area. If you have a profligate son who just refuses to obey the parents, they were to put that son to death under the law. But this passage is going back to Deuteronomy 5:16 that they would live long. But does what we realize that self-discipline, if they're learned discipline early, they will probably avoid things that might lead to a short life because they've learned the discipline that's involved, and that becomes very important as well. So that is our goal, and what it does, it fosters things. It leads to well-being, a disciplined life, and a long life, according to Deuteronomy 5:16. For a Jewish boy in that time, stay long in the land instead of going into captivity or dying at a young age because you didn't obey your parents. Those things would be there as well. But from our standpoint, we don't have a land promise other than we're promised heaven. But only the good die young. We have songs about that. So it doesn't mean that they're bad because they died early. But generally speaking, the disciplined life will lead to a well life and one that's long upon this earth. But what else is it going to be leading to? What self-discipline do we encourage you to do beginning today? For the rest of the year, what is it? Daily Bible reading. Have you started yet? Today you start with Genesis 1, this week. And there's all different types of plans and all different ways of doing that. But is that a discipline that you have developed? If you're a daily Bible reader, it makes you put aside a time, and if your schedule gets messed up, you make sure I do that time. I'm a daily Bible reader. And that takes discipline. Well, where are these children They're going to learn about their responsibilities. They're going to read, understand, and do. And you're coming along before they can read, and you're guiding them in these areas because you know what they need to do. And you're wanting them to understand it. And one day when they read, just like those sitting in the audience when in the church of Ephesus, those young people, when they're hearing the reading, children, obey your parents. Lord, for this is right. They've been raised pretty well, and they're going to realize that's where they get it. And it's interesting, you can be an Old Testament reader and a New Testament reader dealing with children and children's responsibilities. To whom is Proverbs written to? Or for benefit? That's right. And so young people can learn real quickly things that their parents ought to know. And so there's that reading and understanding and putting into practice the discipline that comes from that. I think it helps make daily Bible readers when you're raising them this way. Where did I get that? Deuteronomy 5:16. What's that, Old Testament? Where did I get this thing, children, obey your parents? Where do you get that? New Testament. And you got things in the Old Testament as well. So they're there. But corrective discipline, we need to understand that is essential. That is an essential element in truly loving your child. Let that sink in. Because that's not what our culture, worldly, secular culture, believes. Any corporal punishment today is child abuse in a lot of people's eyes. And one of the blessings, I think, has been, and probably there's going to be the abuse side of it too, when it's all said and done, about people locked up in their homes. Child abuse, I know, has already increased. And for all sorts of reasons. But people aren't going to the malls so they can watch you spank your child when they get out of line. They're not going to turn you into the authorities right now because they don't see you. They're all locked in their house. And you're not going to, then you're online, you're getting Prime come up and deliver your stuff to you now. So they don't, that element may not be there, but it was before COVID. And that area is the corrective discipline is something that this world frowns upon. But what does the Bible say? It's essential to love. And you probably read these, but I want to look at them now and just put it back in our minds. Look at the Proverbs, for example. Proverbs 13 and verse 24 we have in our outline. It says, he that spareth his rod. Thank you. He that spareth his rod. That means you got a rod in your family that belongs to you. You got your paddle, you got your rod of discipline. But he that spareth his rod hateth his son. I also have a son. I also have a daughter. And there's that corrective discipline. But he that loveth him, there's your chastening, chasteneth him betimes. Consistent, often if needed, but there's betimes, when it needs it. And he said that's who loves your child. God is the great example in Hebrews 12, that because he loves, he chastens. And therefore he's not going to destroy you, he's going to discipline you because you want to learn to discipline yourself and that you can live tomorrow instead of just being bruised up so much and you're unconscious and you die because of abusive fathers and abusive mothers. So there's that corrective discipline. And there's penalties in football for unnecessary roughness, but is that football pretty rough? Well, they're making rules now that you barely touch a quarterback. You used to lay him out. But they're making rules to make it safer because the boys are bigger and faster and our bone structure hadn't caught up yet in a lot of people's mind. We don't have enough equipment to keep the fluids of the brain not shaking when you get hit by a 305 guy going 90 miles an hour. It's a violent game, but we still have unnecessary roughness. Spanking is probably, it's the most violent action when you're receiving it, isn't it? This is violent. What in the world am I doing here? And he's beating me, or she's beating me. I call it beating. Oh, it's just a little discipline, spanking. Correction for the moment is so grievous, but afterward it yieldeth peaceable fruit. That's what we're after. We want them to have an after. We don't want this to be the end. And that's because we love them. And therefore, it's communicated that way. Proverbs 22:6. This is an interesting passage that I'm hearing even preachers get into because they want to mostly get into psychological things about the Bible. And these are preachers that are well known. And they take this position. Train up a child in the way he should go, and even when he is old, he will not depart from it. You got a child that all your children are different. And you got a brother who does one thing, and you got to train them in the way they should go. Because see, one child is not going to be affected too much by corporal punishment. I can just look at them, and now I'm going to train them the right way. Well, you train the way he should go. That's the way you ought to be training him, the way he's bent. And this other child's going to be bent another way. I've heard preachers do that. And yeah, there's some wisdom and psychology, but the Bible is wanting to make us godly. What is the way they should go? What are we looking at all these imperatives? And it's not, I see you and I'm so wise, I will train you a certain way, I'll train you another way, and the way you should go. You're bent that way, so I will adjust my discipline. Well, that's fine. That may be wise, but you may miss it. Because either way they're bent, they may not be godly. And if you have trained them the way their personality is and they don't end up godly, I think you're a failure as a parent. And this passage is not to condemn you as a failure when they go astray. Because you get that in them, and when he's old, he not depart from that teaching at a young age. That's what it's emphasizing. That teaching at a young age, I'm training you to be godly. If they go away, they're always going to have that training in them. They're always going to learn that. And with some, it will stay with them, and they will go the right way. And others, it won't. I don't care how much you studied their personality. And they all have a different one. But the way they should go is not ways, it's way he should go, is, I think, godliness. And we'll have to stop there. And we'll pick that up, Lord willing, next time.